right. Welcome in, everyone. Today we're doing a deep dive into Living Clean, which is a booklet from Narcotics Anonymous. Even if you've never personally dealt with addiction, this booklet has some really cool stuff that can apply to just about anybody. It's kind of like a guide to not just surviving life, but really thriving,
Yeah.
even if you've had some bumps in the road.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it comes from an addiction recovery background, obviously, but the thing is how much of it just clicks with anyone who wants to grow personally or, build better relationships, or even just handle all the curveballs life throws at you with a bit more grace.
It's like they took all the tough lessons of recovery and they said, hey, these are actually principles for just living a better life, full stop.
Yeah.
One thing that really hit me was this whole idea of discovering your true self
Yeah.
after addiction. It made me wonder, have some of us never really known our true selves?
Yeah.
Because we've been kind of putting on an act for so long.
It's a really interesting thought. The booklet basically says that addiction or even other big life events can really kind of warp our personalities and our sense of self. So recovery isn't just about changing bad habits. It's almost like uncovering a whole new layer of who you are.
Yeah, and get this, it's not about religion at all. The booklet says straight up, it's spiritual, not religious. They even have a part that talks about how to talk about spiritual awakenings without, pushing people away from different faiths or whatever.
Right. They seem to get that while the language is from 12-step stuff, the principles themselves, they're kind of universal. It's about connecting to something bigger than yourself, however you define that.
What got me was this focus on what we do, not just what we think. It's like a call to action. It made me realize how often I get stuck in my head, overthinking everything, instead of actually taking steps to change.
Yeah, it seems like they're tackling that all or nothing thinking that gets us in trouble. They're all about finding that balance. Moving away from extremes, it's something we can all relate to, I think. Whether it's work-life balance or even just trying to manage our emotions. Setting realistic goals, right?
Oh, totally. How many times have we all been like, yeah, I'm going to hit the gym every day this
Yeah.
year, and then you burn out after a week?
Exactly. They're not about rigid rules. It's about what works for you, building those practices that last. It's the difference between temporary changes and actually transforming your life.
Speaking of transformations, there's this really cool part in Living Clean about the upside of hardship. They talk about those emotional and spiritual crises that we go through, when it feels like everything's falling apart.
What's wild is that the booklet doesn't say that's a failure. They suggest these crises can be chances to really grow, like you understand yourself in a deeper way. It's almost like, what if breaking down I asked the breakthrough just in disguise?
They even say that people years into recovery can suddenly feel scared that it's all going to unravel. Like, what if I mess this up? That's something anybody can get, even if you've never struggled with addiction.
It totally makes sense, though. It says those ups and downs are normal for all of us, especially when we're trying to make positive changes in our lives. Setbacks don't mean you're back at square one. They're just part of the journey.
And speaking of journeys, the booklet digs into this whole experience of self-discovery in recovery. It's not just about changing who you are, it's about uncovering who you were all along, before whatever life threw at you.
That's so true. It's like peeling back layers of illusion to find your true self. I think that's powerful for anyone trying to grow.
Totally. And then there's a whole part on relationships. They
Right.
talk about how addiction can really mess with intimacy and trust, and even just your patterns of behavior.
Yeah, and it's not just about romantic relationships. It applies to all kinds of relationships. It got me thinking about my family, my friends, even work. How does my past, my old habits affect how I connect with people?
One thing that stood out was that they say don't jump into new romantic relationships in that first year of recovery. Work on yourself first, which seems smart.
It does make sense. Build that strong foundation for yourself before you bring someone else in. It's putting your own well-being first so you can be healthy in that relationship.
That leads right into their thing about living with purpose. Living Clean really emphasizes that, finding fulfillment in work, education, even finances, and helping others.
It's about making your actions match your values, creating a life that feels meaningful. It's taking responsibility for your choices and making a path that fits with what you want.
And they get specific, too. There's a whole section on money problems in recovery.
Yeah, and how being self-supporting can actually lead to more freedom, both financially and emotionally. It's not just about making money, it's how you think about it, how you handle it, and how it affects your whole well-being.
It feels like we've only just scratched the surface of Living Clean.
That's the best part, though. We're just getting started. But before we go any further, just think about what's hit you so far. What stood out? What's one tiny action inspired by all this that you could do today? Just something to think about as we keep going. It's cool how Living Clean talks about taking care of your body, too. It's not just all this mental and spiritual stuff.
Yeah, I noticed that. They actually acknowledge that, like, we're not just minds floating around. We have bodies,
Yeah.
and how we treat them is a big part of recovery. And I think well-being in general, right?
Absolutely. What got me was this idea that, like, your physical, emotional, and spiritual selves, they're all linked. It's not like they're separate boxes. And the point isn't to have some perfect body. It's about being healthy in the body you've got.
Makes sense. It reminds me how sometimes people get almost disconnected from their bodies, especially if they've been through trauma or addiction, like they lose touch with what their body needs, how it feels.
Yeah, the booklet says part of recovery is getting that connection back. They're big on self-care, but not in that cheesy treat yourself way. It's deeper. It's about respecting your body.
It made me think of that thing they said about people with high pain tolerance. Like, being tough can actually make self-care harder.
It's like they're so used to pushing through anything they forget to listen to what their body's trying to tell them. Living Clean is saying we should look at how we deal with pain. Knowing when to push and when to actually take care of ourselves, it's a balance.
And they talk about body image stuff too, like how that can get even more intense in recovery. All the pressure to look a certain way, worrying about your weight changing.
Yeah, those struggles are real. The booklet is all about self-compassion, focusing on health, not some impossible ideal.
They mention how some people might get kind of compulsive with food or exercise to deal with those anxieties.
It goes back to that balance, right?
Yeah.
Recovery isn't about swapping one set of rules for another. It's finding what's healthy and what works for you long term, for your mind and body.
Then there's this other side of the physical stuff they get into, all that thrill-seeking adventure stuff.
Yeah.
Made me think how a lot of people struggling with addiction are searching for that rush.
That's such a good point. And Living Clean knows that wanting excitement doesn't just disappear in recovery.
They even say some people find healthy ways to get that, like through extreme sports or stuff like that. Things that have that same kind of intensity.
But there's a warning there too, right? Don't let that thrill-seeking just become another addiction, another thing you have to do. It's walking that line between having adventures and making choices that are actually good for you.
It's knowing why you're doing something.
Mm-hmm.
Are you actually enjoying it, or are you just chasing a feeling? Living Clean wants you to really think about that.
Speaking of thinking, the booklet goes deep on how our relationships are affected by all this. This is where I think it gets really relatable for everyone, even if you've never dealt with addiction yourself.
Oh, totally. It's about connecting with people. They talk about how addiction can damage your ability to have healthy relationships, period. Anyone, family, friends, romantic partners, whoever.
They say it can breed isolation, distrust, all these bad patterns.
And so recovery becomes about rebuilding those bridges, learning to trust again, figuring out new ways to relate to people.
It's way more than just saying, I'm sorry. It's about actually changing how you interact with the world.
It's like what they said about not jumping into romantic relationships too soon. You got to build yourself up first before you can really connect with someone else in a healthy way. Applies here too.
Exactly. Recognizing that you have to be good with yourself before you can be good in a relationship. And that's true no matter what kind of relationship it is.
Living Clean doesn't sugarcoat it, though. They say relationships can still be tough even when you're in recovery.
Makes sense. I mean, those old ways of doing things can creep back in even when you're trying your best.
They're all about constant work, being aware of yourself, talking things out to handle those bumps in the road that happen.
It's interesting. They say that the closeness of the NA Fellowship can actually help heal those relationship wounds.
Like it's a whole new type of connection.
Right.
Built on people getting you, having been there. Especially if you felt alone for a long time, that could be powerful stuff.
There's a whole section on family, which makes sense. Family is complicated enough without addiction thrown in.
Right. It's not like those relationships magically get easy just because someone's in recovery.
Exactly. Living Clean talks about how addiction can cause rifts, make people resentful, break that trust.
And so recovery often means trying to fix that damage. Rebuilding trust, learning new ways to talk to each other.
They say honesty, forgiveness, being patient, all that is key.
But they also say that sometimes, things can't be fixed. And that's okay too. It's a pretty real take.
Yeah, they don't give you easy answers. They get that every family is different. There's no one solution that works for everyone.
They even have a part for parents who are in recovery, which honestly adds a whole other level of complexity.
It does. They talk about raising kids while you're on your own recovery journey. And it's not about pretending everything's perfect.
They're big on setting healthy boundaries, taking care of yourself, and showing your kids good behavior by doing it yourself.
It's about trying to make a stable, loving home, but knowing you're not going to be the perfect parent. Nobody is.
What hit me was the part about letting go of control, letting your kids be who they are.
That's such a big one, especially if you're used to trying to control everything. Letting go is hard.
But it's about trusting the process, giving other people the space to grow, to make their own choices.
Recognizing that your kid's path is theirs. All you can do is love and support them.
And that's good advice for anyone, parent or not. Letting go of that need to control can be so freeing.
For sure. Living Clean also spends a good chunk talking about finding your place in the world, like beyond just recovery. It's not just staying clean, it's building a whole life you enjoy, with work, education, the whole 9 yards.
Like they're saying you don't stay in this recovery bubble. You take those principles and apply them to everything.
Exactly. And it's not about erasing your past, pretending it never happened. It's using what you've learned to build your present and future.
They talk about finding work that matches your values, something that gives you purpose, which a lot of people struggle with, I think.
It's got to be more than just a paycheck. It's about using your skills and doing something that feels right.
And of course, financial responsibility, being able to support yourself.
Which makes sense. If you're trying to build a stable life, being okay with money is a big part of that.
They even encourage people to keep learning, whether it's going back to school or just exploring new stuff.
Love that. It's like a reminder that you never stop learning. And it can be so cool no matter how old you are or what you've done.
Talking about work, they get that finding the right thing can be hard, especially if you've had a tough time holding down jobs in the past.
But again, it's not just taking any job to have one. Find work that means something, even if it takes a while.
They also talk about that work-life balance thing, setting boundaries so your job doesn't take over everything else, especially your recovery.
Taking care of yourself first. Sometimes that means saying no to things, even if they look like good opportunities, especially if it could hurt your recovery.
Then they get into finances, which can be stressful for anyone, but especially for folks in recovery.
Yeah, they talk about how addiction can lead to money problems and bad choices.
And so recovery means learning to handle your money the right way, paying off what you owe, being able to take care of yourself. It's about taking control and feeling secure.
Being honest in how you deal with money, that's huge. It's not just about the numbers, it's about your character, how you handle responsibility.
They say to let go of that feeling of entitlement too, which can lead to bad habits with money. It's about having a healthy relationship with money, being responsible, grateful, and content.
Totally different than what might have been going on during active addiction, like a whole new way of thinking.
And beyond work and money, they're big on giving back.
It's pretty cool. It's realizing you have something to offer, even if it's just your experience, sharing that.
They talk about service in all forms, volunteering your time, helping others in recovery, just being a good member of your community.
Understanding that you're part of something bigger and that helping others can be really fulfilling.
It doesn't have to be some huge thing either. Even small acts of kindness make a difference.
And being humble about it, right? It's not for attention. It's about actually wanting to make things better.
Speaking of making things better, Living Clean talks about how important stability is in recovery.
Yeah, it's about making your life feel solid and secure, even with all the ups and downs that happen.
They say that addiction can bring chaos and instability.
And recovery is about creating order, routine, having things you can predict. It's not about being super rigid, but about making good habits and a solid base for your life.
Basic self-care, like getting enough sleep, eating well, exercising, they're all important.
But stable doesn't mean staying the same, right? They're all for pushing yourself, going after your goals, trying new things. It's finding that balance between being secure and growing.
Making a life that feels both safe and exciting.
Exactly. Remember how we talked about education? They're all about learning throughout your life, whether it's going back to school or just following your interests.
They get that addiction can mess with your education. You might have gaps in what you know or what you're able to do.
And recovery becomes a chance to fill those gaps, learn new stuff, expand what you know. It's being open to new information and challenging those thoughts you might have that say you're not smart enough or capable enough.
You get the practical stuff too, like education can help you get better jobs.
But they also talk about how good it feels to learn, how it can boost your self-esteem, make you see the world differently, bring you joy and fulfillment.
It's about realizing you're capable of more than you think, and that learning can be empowering. It's like, it's so easy to focus on what's wrong, you know, what we're missing. But living clean is all about looking for the good stuff, even when things are tough.
Yeah, like changing how you see things, right?
Yeah.
Instead of being bummed about what you don't have, you appreciate what you do have, all the good things that are already there.
And it doesn't have to be these big, huge things either. It could be, I don't know, like a sunny day or a good cup of coffee or a friend saying something nice. The book even says those little moments can bring you joy if you actually stop and appreciate them,
They say that being grateful can actually make you a more positive person overall. Like it spreads, you know? The more you look for good stuff, the more you start to see good in everything.
which kind of leads into that whole living in the moment thing they're big on. It's so easy to get stuck in the past, thinking about all the things you regret and messed up, or worrying about the future and what might happen.
Our minds are always going back and forth in time, right? But recovery, heck, life in general, it's about learning to be present, enjoying each moment as it comes.
Being mindful, paying attention to what you're feeling, what you're sensing, really being aware of right here, right now.
Grounding yourself, it can be really freeing, you know? You stop getting trapped in all that worrying about the past or the future.
And living clean doesn't avoid the hard parts of life either. There's a whole section on dealing with grief and loss, which, let's be honest, we all go through that at some point.
It's going to happen to all of us. Losing someone you love, a relationship ending, losing a job, even losing your old way of life when you get into recovery. Those are all really painful things.
But the book says that it's normal to grieve, it's healthy, it's not something to try and run away from or pretend isn't happening.
Let yourself feel those emotions, don't bottle them up, and find people who get it, you know? People who can support you.
They also say healing takes time. It's not going to be a straight line. Some days are good, some days are bad.
But you're not alone in it. And with time and help from others, it can get better. You can find peace again.
They talk about faith being important in all this too.
Faith can give you comfort and hope when things are really dark. It can help you believe that your suffering has a meaning, even if you don't see it right now.
They say turn to whatever your faith is. Prayer, meditation, connecting with others who believe what you believe.
It's about finding strength and comfort to help you through those rough times.
And even after a loss, living clean is all about finding meaning and purpose. It's easy to feel lost when something big like that happens, but they remind you that you can still have a purpose.
Focus on what matters to you, what brings you joy, and how you can contribute to the world in a way that feels right.
It could be as simple as being a good friend or helping out in your community. But that sense of purpose, it gives you something to work towards, a reason to keep going.
Yeah, and that's a powerful thing, especially when you're dealing with grief and loss. It's like a reminder that even when things are painful, life can still be beautiful and have meaning.
Living clean really hits hard with this idea that recovery is a journey, not a destination. It never really ends. You're always growing and changing.
They're all about constantly learning, evolving, becoming more who you're supposed to be, you know?
I like how they encourage you to stay open to new things, challenge yourself, and never stop growing. It's about embracing the whole ride, the good and the bad.
And the cool thing is there's always more to learn, more to see, more to become. That's pretty exciting.
So as we're wrapping up our deep dive into living clean, I think what really stands out is how much wisdom it has for everyone, even people who've never dealt with addiction. It's really a guidebook to living a better life, a life with more purpose and meaning.
Connecting with who you really are, building healthy relationships, making a life you enjoy, those are things everyone wants.
We've just skimmed the surface here, but hopefully this has given you some new ideas and maybe even inspired you to explore some of this stuff on your own.
And remember, figuring yourself out, growing as a person, that never really ends. It's not about getting to some finish line. It's about the journey and becoming the best version of yourself.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep living clean.